Have you ever stopped to think about what happens after death? What if someone came back from there with a warning directly from Jesus? And a date, August 31st, 2025. In today's video, you'll learn the true story of Kayla Monroe, an American influencer who died of an overdose and had a supernatural experience where she saw the doomsday clock, the book of last chances, and heard from Jesus, "Mercy is running out." Like, subscribe to the channel, and comment below which city you're watching from, because this message needs to reach far and wide. My name is Kayla Monroe. I'm 21 years old, and until the day I died, I was an ordinary girl, or at least I pretended to be. I grew up in Dallas, Texas, but the world knew me through Instagram. Hundreds of thousands of followers, perfect filters, a toned body, a dream life. No one saw the broken part. No one saw the emptiness. It was August 2024. I was in a party in Los Angeles, the kind everyone dreams of getting into. Beautiful people, loud music, powder passing from hand to hand like mints. I'd done everything in my life, but that night, I wanted to disconnect from my feelings. I took something I don't even know the name of. I mixed it with alcohol, and when I looked at myself in the bathroom mirror, it was as if my own eyes were saying goodbye to me. My fingers began to tingle. My heart beat so fast it felt like a tribal drum exploding in my chest. And then silence. Everything went black. I thought I'd passed out, but I hadn't, because when I fell to the ground and saw my body there, I was still awake. I can't explain the terror I felt. I screamed, but no one heard. I was standing, but I was falling at the same time. People were banging on the door, calling my name, and I, floating above the scene, as if it were a ghost that no one saw. Suddenly, everything around went silent. So silent that the sound of the party, the music, the screams, everything stopped. And that's when walls began to dissolve like smoke, as if that reality were burning paper. I wasn't in Los Angeles anymore. I was crossing an invisible threshold, where time, space, and logic no longer made sense. That's when I felt the presence. Not an ordinary presence. It was powerful, warm, deep, as if the universe itself had stopped to look at me. I was dying, or maybe I was already dead. But something, or someone, was waiting for me there. As the light before me grew, a voice echoed inside me, mouthless, soundless, but more audible than anything I have ever heard. "You were not created to die like this." My knees felt weak, even without a body. And when I looked up at that bright light, time stood still. The light was no ordinary light. It was viva. It breathed. It pulsed. And from it arose a figure, and before I could even say anything, my spirit already knew who it was. He, Jesus. Not like in the movies, not like in the stained glass windows of churches. It was much more. Holy, immense. At the same time, sweet and unbearable. My soul wanted to hide, but at the same time it wanted to throw itself into his arms. That's when he spoke, without moving his lips, straight to my essence. "Kayla, you'll have to go back. But first you need to see what's coming. Time is running out." And then, a date burned inside me like fire in the flesh. August 31st, 2025. This is the last chance. That phrase was engraved like an eternal seal on my spirit. And what came next was the most terrifying and beautiful sight a human being could ever bear. When Jesus spoke those words, August 31st, 2025, "This is the last chance," something inside me snapped. It was as if assonant trumpet resounded throughout the cosmos, announcing an invisible milestone for humanity. I could barely breathe, even though I didn't have lungs. It was as if the air of eternity carried too much weight for an imperfect soul like mine. Suddenly, he reached out his hand and the space around us tore like a veil, revealing something that made me tremble with fear and reverence at the same time. On earth, seen from above, suspended in a blanket of darkness and light, and hovering over her, a colossal clock made of constellations, flames, and gears of living light. It was neither metallic nor mechanical. It was as if time itself had become a living creature. The second hand moved too fast. Jesus looked at me and said, "Their time is being accelerated, and almost no one notices." I saw people on earth, millions, billions, running, working, dancing, laughing, fighting, caught in screens, in anxieties, in ambitions. But above all, the clock pulsed like a living threat. And then, without warning, a single date shone on the celestial dial, 31, AUG, 2025, didn't blink. It burned tremulously, as if it were being forged with pain. "It is the final alarm," Jesus whispered, and even in the whisper there was thunder, mercy and judgment at the same time. It was then that the earth began to tremble before me. I saw invisible cracks appearing in the heavens and in people's hearts. People smiled as the spiritual ground opened beneath their feet. Jesus said, "Many mock the truth because they do not see it. But in the unseen, the gate of mercy already creaks shut." At that moment, what was heaven before me opened up into parallel layers of reality. I saw children playing in playgrounds while angels wept silently beside them, pastors preaching without passion, and their words falling to the ground like dust, young people at shows, parties, drugs, and over their heads, clocks frozen in the last seconds. And I also saw humble homes with lit candles and whispered prayers, which rose like rivers of light to the throne of God. Jesus pointed to the cities. Every prayer slows down the pointer, every hardened heart accelerates it, but nothing can prevent the appointed day. I wanted to scream. I wanted to go back and shake the world with this warning. It was then that he looked at me with eyes like time itself in flames, and said, "Kayla, you'll see what happens when the date arrives, and you'll understand why I say this is the last chance." Before I could answer, the spiritual ground opened up beneath us and I was sucked into the next revelation. When I was swallowed up by that vision of the clock, my soul plummeted, not down, as if it were going to fall, but inside as if every layer of my being was being ripped away, exposed, transformed. I felt like I was traveling inside me, and at the same time, crossing centuries of spiritual history, until everything stopped. I now found myself faced with something that no human word can describe without failing. One gate made of pure living light, bigger than mountains, vaster than the sky, and breathing as a conscious being. Every spark that emanated from him was like a whisper of love, and at the same time, a desperate call, Era, the gate of mercy. And he was starting to close. The sound it made, it wasn't like metal grinding. It was like the sound of millions of hearts breaking at the same time, as if the sky was crying inside. I heard voices, thousands, millions, screaming, pleading, banging from outside, from inside, from all sides, people saying, "I didn't know. Give me one more day. I was going to change, just a little longer." And then Jesus appeared beside me again. But this time, he cried, yes, the King of the universe was crying. "They wait for the end to change, but the end doesn't wait for them," he said, his voice choked with pain and glory. I saw Athena's spiritual crowd arriving before that gate, souls, ordinary people, young, old, children. Some knelt and broke down in repentance, and the doors opened wide for them, like the arms of a father thirsting for reunion. Others just passed by from afar, laughing, mocking, or looking at one's own reflection, distracted. And for those, the gate closed slowly, like someone closing their eyes in sadness. With each second, the half-open light dimmed. It was then that Jesus touched me on the shoulder and said something that burned my spirit more than any hell. On August 31st, 2025, this gate will be sealed, not in wrath, but in justice. I fell to my knees. And after that, I asked, my soul in pieces. He responded, without anger, without shouting, just the naked, raw, eternal truth. After that comes what each person chose, not what they desired, but what they lived. The sound of the gate echoed like a heavenly drum, and then he showed me who could still pass. And what I saw next was even more painful. The light around the gate began to intensify, as if each ray was trying to reach those who still had a chance to enter. And it was then that Jesus said, "See who can still hear. See who can still choose." Before me, a huge crowd began to form, like a human wave emerging from the earth itself. They were millions, maybe billions, but they weren't walking. They appeared like reflections in jellyfish, translucent but perfectly recognizable. They were people still alive. Yes, Jesus was showing me those who were still breathing in the physical world. Young people with headphones walking the streets of New York, boys playing video games in dark basements in Arkansas, girls taking selfies in front of the mirror in Miami, Men driving in a hurry to meetings. Women wiping tears alone in the bathrooms at work, all with one thing in common. They didn't know the spiritual clock was about to stop. I saw them, but they didn't see me, and it hurt, because among them, I saw familiar faces, we my followers, those who liked my photos, who messaged me, who wanted to know my beauty secret, and now, I just wanted to scream at them. Wake up, you're living as if there were time, but time is bleeding. Jesus reached out and touched the air in front of us. Suddenly, every person in that crowd was surrounded by a dim light, like a candle about to go out. This is the flame of consciousness, he said. While it burns, there is still a chance, but for many, the breeze of distraction is already blowing over it. I then saw the decisive moments of several people. A young woman about to cut herself, but looking up to the sky and whispering, "God, do you hear me?" A boy who always mocked faith, but that day, alone at home, felt an inexplicable emptiness and opened his grandmother's Bible. A woman who was going to commit suicide, but turned on the radio and heard someone talking about Jesus at that very moment. They were small acts, small choices, but in the spirit world, they were like deafening trumpets. Jesus said, "Every choice is a direction, every gesture, a seed." On August 31st, the soil will be sealed. Whatever is planted will flourish or rot. At that moment, I saw crying angels. Yes, angels with flaming wings, kneeling, seeing these souls and crying out silently, wake up before the gate closes." But the world was deaf, stuck in series, idiotic debates, sealing, likes and addictions, like a ship meters away from the iceberg, with the band still playing. And then Jesus looked at me, with pain and authority, and said, "They can still hear, but they won't hear heaven. They'll hear you." It was there that I understood that the sky is not silent. We are the ones who have earplugs in our souls, and the time is no longer walking. He is running. And then he led me to the vision of what happens when the gate finally closes. I thought nothing could shock me more than the cosmic clock, the invisible crowd, or the weeping gate. But what came next was the vision of the after. Jesus looked at me with an expression so solemn, so heavy, that my spirit wanted to retreat. And then he said, "Now, Kayla, I'm going to show you what happens when the door closes." At the same time, a thunder of silence cut everything around us. A thunder made of silence, a silence that weighed tons, that pressed the chest of the soul, as if the universe itself were holding its breath. Before me, the gate of mercy has finally closed. With a sound so deep it seemed as if eternity was slamming the last door of the ark. A bang, a final beat, and then nothing. The light that once pulsed stopped. The souls that still tried to get closer were blocked by an invisible wall. They screamed, but the screams did not leave. It was the supreme nightmare of the human soul, realizing the truth too late. Jesus, with tears in his eyes, said, "Most people don't believe until they feel the absence." I saw people running in despair, not in physical despair, but in the plane of the soul. Some fell to their knees, trying to call on his name. Others tried to bargain. Others still cursed, denied, and became hardened. But the gate stood there, still, motionless, closed. It wasn't hate. It wasn't cruelty. Era, justice. Jesus said, the time was given. The warning was given. The love was offered. It was then that I saw something even more distressing. People inside churches, outside the gate. Yes, religious people, leaders, preachers, young people who sang but never knew him. They knew in Jesus, but had never truly surrendered to him. "I served my whole life," one of them shouted, but within the sky, no one answered. The truth cut like a sword. It's not about religion. It's about surrender. Jesus looked at me firmly and said, "Kayla, I'm not showing this to condemn. I'm showing it to awaken. There's still time, but not much longer." My spirit trembled. I wanted to run back, climb buildings, shout in the streets, grab every human being by the face and say, "You're on time." And that's when Jesus showed me something that almost made me collapse. The book, the one who carries the names. And there, between dates that faded away, a line glowed like liquid fire. August 31st, 2025, last chance. It was like the last second before a spiritual atomic bomb detonates. And he said to me, "There will never be another warning like this. This is the final window." The gate, now closed, remained silent, but her memories screamed inside me. And what Jesus showed me next was the fate of every choice before the end. After the gate of mercy closed, I thought there was nothing left to see, that I had already witnessed the end. But then Jesus looked at me and said, "Now, Kayla, you need to understand why. You need to see how choices build destinies." And with a gentle movement of his hand, he opened before us a landscape that took my spiritual breath away. An immense, crystalline, and frighteningly alive river, which flowed unhurriedly through a valley of light. But that was no ordinary water. Every drop of the river carried stories, decisions, thoughts, secrets. It was the river of choices. Jesus explained, "Every soul walks beside this invisible river, and everything it chooses, feels, thinks, rejects, or loves flows here." I approached the shore, and as soon as I looked, I saw my own reflection. But it wasn't just my face. I saw moments, memories, when I rejected that friend's invitation to go to church, when I made fun of someone who talked about faith, when I cried alone, wanting God, but not having the courage to seek Him. Everything was there. The river remembered. "Oh, river away." The river bore witness. Jesus pointed to the waters, and suddenly, other lives began to be reflected there too. A 12-year-old boy delivering his snack to a hungry classmate. A girl in a club bathroom kneeling in silence, saying, "Jesus, if you're real, find me." A man with terminal cancer, smiling with a Bible on his lap. Every act, no matter how small, lit points of light on the river, but there were also stains, decisions that seemed small, but carried eternal weight. An abortion covered by silence. A betrayal hidden under excuses. A heart that knew it needed to change, but chose to postpone it. Jesus said to me, "The river doesn't judge, it only reveals. And in the end, it divides." And then, like a film that abruptly changes tone, I saw the end of the river, where the waters separated into two arms. One, an arm fell into a sea of golden light, alive, singing like a celestial choir. Two, the other, disappeared into a dark mist, where the drops lost their shine, and the silence turned to despair. There was no middle ground. There was no, almost salvation. Every drop, each choice, took someone to one of those sides. And then he looked at me and said, "Kayla, on August 31st, 2025, the river will be irreversibly divided. Every heart will have gone its own way. After that, there will be no bridge. There will be no patch." My soul knelt right there. The weight of reality was crushing. It was not a myth. It was not a symbolic warning. It was the map of eternal destiny. And then Jesus said, "You haven't seen everything yet. There's something more. Something that's never been shown like this before." And with that, he took me to the chamber that holds the book that determines the last chance. Jesus led me down a corridor that was not made of stone nor of light, but of something much deeper. It was done on purpose. Each step we took made the ground shine beneath our feet, as if it recognized whoever was walking there. I felt like I was getting into one of the most sacred places in all creation. "This is the chamber of the book," Jesus said, his voice now deep as muffled thunder. "Few have seen what you will see now." And there he was, in the center of an altar vivo, suspended in the air, enveloped in an aura of liquid gold and soft flames, rested a gigantic book. It wasn't made of paper. It was as if it had been carved from living memory, in condensed time. It was the last chance book. Even before I get close, I felt like my spiritual bones were shaking. The light that emanated from him was too beautiful for common eyes, and too hard for feigned hearts. Jesus spoke, without taking his eyes off the book. "Here are the names. Every human being has one, and next to each name, a date. The date of the last chance." With a gesture, the book began to turn its own pages, as if it knew it was being read. Thousands, millions of names appeared, each with a line of fire next to it. Emily J. Carter, June 17th, 2024. Marcus L. Kareem, October 5th, 2023. Danielle R. Moore, March 2, 2025. And then the pages stopped, without being touched. And there, written in letters so fiery they burned my eyes, was the line I will never forget. August 31st, 2025. all remaining names, I took a step back, startled. Does that mean everyone? My soul asked soundlessly. Jesus nodded with tears in his eyes. Yes, this is the closing of a season of mercy. Those who have not yet heard will hear. Those who have not yet chosen will choose. And on that day the window will close. I approached the book, even though I was afraid. And then, as if in an involuntary reflex, I saw my name. Kayla Monroe, August 24th, 2024. I was out of breath. But that was the day I died. Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. And it was also the day you came back, because your last chance became your new beginning. Tears fell, but there was no pain in them. There was heaviness, the weight of knowing that every name there was someone breathing now, thinking they have time. What if they don't know? I asked. Then silence will be charged. That sentence burned inside me. Silence, what seemed neutral, was guilt before heaven. Jesus looked at me with firmness and love. You saw, you know, and because of that, you will return with fire in your bones. But before he gave it back to me, he still wanted me to see it, the faces. Jesus took me to one last vision before the end of my experience. It was a large, well-known church with thousands of members. The service was underway. The lights were on. The sound was perfect. The choir was in perfect alignment. The screens were showing verses and catchphrases. Everything seemed vivo, but Jesus stretched out his hand, and the scene was peeled before me, as if the appearance split in half, revealing what lay behind the structure. And what I saw, it was terrifying. I saw a platform built in quicksand, made of human opinions, marketing, pop psychology, and performance. The ministers were shiny mannequins, one with hollow hearts. Worship was an empty echo, and upon the altar was a throne, empty. Jesus said with regret, "They sing to me, but I'm not there." His presence was not welcome. The Holy Spirit had no freedom. Everything was rehearsed, programmed, controlled, and then he showed me the spiritual backstage of that church, where demons influenced decisions that appeared to be strategic, where pride and struggle for power grew among the leaders, where hidden sins were ignored in the name of not scandalizing the ministry. And more, we another church, traditional, full of liturgy, reverent on the outside, but on the inside, cold, theoretical, spiritually dead. The words were read without soul. The chants, murmured like formulas. The pulpit, occupied by men who no longer believed in the full authority of the Bible. And Jesus said to me, "They preserve the form, but they deny the fire." A great hidden truth. What he revealed to me is that many churches that appear alive are in reality dead in the eyes of heaven. What shocked me was seeing that some of these churches, they had social projects, large online audiences, political influence, and a constant presence in the media, but no presence of God. They had applause from society, but the sky was silent. Then Jesus asked me a direct question. "Jonathan, if my presence were removed from 97% of the world's churches today, how many of them would notice?" I couldn't answer. I just cried, because he showed me that many churches learn to function without God. The program continues. The service continues. Social media is booming, but the altar is empty. The glory is gone, and nobody noticed. This is the hidden tragedy of false churches. They appear alive to men, but they are dead before the throne. And it was then that Jesus showed me the last and most frightening fate of churches that refuse to change. Darkness enveloped me like a cloak, not cold, not scary, but solemn, as if even the sky itself held its breath. Jesus was beside me, silent, as if he knew what was about to be revealed cannot be ignored without consequences. Suddenly, a subtle sound began to echo. Tick, tack, tick, tack. It wasn't just any watch. It was like the heart of time beating. Before us, the void opened, and a gigantic calendar appeared floating in the sky, made of living light and flaming paint. Each month was a translucent layer, each day, a pulsing vein. And there he was, August 2025. Jesus pointed to the calendar, and the pages began to turn by themselves. January, February, March, until the August page opened like a torn curtain. I saw the days passing by, 1, 2, 3, 15, 22, 28. But then, when it reached 31, time stopped. That number, 31, was marked, not with paint, but with flaming blood. It pulsed, it burned, It vibrated, as if the universe itself was trying to warn. Here, Jesus said, this is the final point, the supreme alarm, the cry for mercy before the eternal silence. I watched, in shock, as the world continued to live normally that day. I saw cars on the streets, crowded shopping malls, people celebrating birthdays, weddings, parties, live streams on TikTok. But above all this, the date shone like an invisible siren, and nobody saw, no one listened, almost no one believed it. It was then that the sound changed. The ticking became a roar. The minute hand turned on its own until it reached midnight, and at that very second, the spiritual sky broke in two. One side exuded glory, light, salvation, absolute peace. The other side closed like a crack that would never open again. Jesus held me tightly and said, Kayla, on this day, every soul will have chosen. The gate will be sealed. Mercy will have completed its cycle. And the world will enter a new time, a time that begins not with celebration but with separation. My spiritual legs were shaking, and then I asked in a choked voice, but what about those who would still be willing? Those who haven't heard yet? What if someone wants to jump in at the last minute? He looked deeply into my eyes, and with the most holy pain I have ever felt, he replied, that's why you're coming back now, to be the warning before closing, so that no one can say, I didn't know. The calendar began to disappear, but the number 31 was printed in the sky, like a seal, like a reminder, like a punch into eternity. I looked at Jesus and asked softly, and after that, what happens to the world? He replied, with a whisper that seemed to echo throughout the galaxies. After that, begins the time that no longer belongs to mercy, but to judgment. It was then that the light around us began to change. The time to return had come. But first, Jesus wanted to show me one last place, the place where the new begins, or ends. The atmosphere around us changed. The light that was once golden, warm, charged with eternity, began to dissolve into a soft, bluish, almost gray hue. Jesus looked at me with a silence that said more than 1,000 voices. Now, Kayla, you will see the valley where everything defines itself. Within seconds, we were in a new place. But it wasn't heaven. It wasn't land. It was the space between the two, the valley of decision. It was vast, almost infinite, like a field of living fog, where millions of trails crisscrossed. On each path, there was people of all ages, races, and backgrounds, and they all had the same expression on their faces: uncertainty, weight, and urgency. Jesus said, here, every soul passes through, even if they don't know it. The human heart lives in this valley every day without realizing it. And then, I saw what those people saw. Some were in front of a cross shrouded in light. They hesitated, they cried, but finally took the step and surrendered. Others looked back at the pleasures, the vices, the followers, the money, the pride, and turned their backs. Every choice there moved the eternal destiny of the person. A gesture in the valley shaped eternity. Jesus pointed to a young man kneeling, saying, this one will turn himself in to me on August 30th. He almost wouldn't have made it in, but someone will talk to him in time. Then he pointed to a girl laughing with friends, with her cell phone in her hand. She will be touched by a video of you. At first she will laugh, but at night she will cry and call me. And then he pointed to a man in a suit, silent, with a bitter look. This one won't listen. He's already decided, even with all the signs. The valley was full, overflowing with choices about to happen, but above it, the sky was silent, waiting. Jesus said, soon the valley will close, decisions will be sealed, and there will be no more path between light and darkness, only consequence. At that moment, something incredible happened. Tears streamed down Jesus' face. They fell onto the valley floor, and where they fell, a light was shining, a warning, a chance. Every tear of mine is a seed of mercy, but they cannot sprout unless someone waters them with the truth. That's when I understood, with my spirit on fire. I am the rain. You are. We all are. We are the rain that waters the tears of the sky with the warning that can save. Jesus looked at me one last time, and he said, with the voice of one who carries the universe, Kayla Monroe, now you know. Come back, speak, shout, sow, because on August 31st, 2025, the valley will close, and silence will take the place of the call. Before I could say anything, I was pulled back hard. Light, darkness, scream, breath, wait. I woke up on a stretcher, surrounded by paramedics. I had returned, but inside would never be the same again, because now I carry the fire of the last chance. If you enjoyed this beautiful spiritual testimony, please leave a like, comment, share your impressions, subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to turn on the notification bell to watch each new video and help us spread this message to a greater number of people. Until next time.